Now, shifting to the more ideological side, these again are Basijis, and this is the kind of chest thumping that you see at a lot of various commemorations, religious commemorations. This one, I believe, marks the 40th day after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, who is the third Shiite Imam, and the one who is so revered in Shiism as the Lord of the Martyrs. And in fact, the title of my book comes from the last words of this Imam Hussein. The reason why Imam Hussein matters in the Shiite worldview is because he, as the Lord of the Martyrs, demonstrated how important it was to resist against a bigger enemy, to resist against a stronger force for the right and just cause. So the scene, as it took place in 680 AD, this is on the plains of Karbala, and this is known to every Shiite. This is just part of the knowledge about the religion. It's a crucial moment. 680 AD. There's Imam Hussein surrounded with 72 of his believers, followed and surrounded by tens of thousands of the enemy from Yazid's army. And basically, Imam Hussein stated, if the religion of Muhammad can only survive with my death, then and he opens his tunic, then let the swords encircle me. So those are the words that kind of codify that moment. And again, his death is marked with an event called Ashura every single year. And people, this is when you see in some places in the Muslim world, when you see, for example, in southern Lebanon, in Iraq, you see people hitting swords against their heads and causing blood to flow down and everything else. They are normally marking the death of Imam Hussein and the injustice of it. I'm not sure if the word enemy applies to a couple of young guys from the Revolutionary Guard who have such ill-fitting uniforms. These are conscripts, just young guys, and these are the kind of young guys you see, all over the place in Tehran. Of course, many of them do have correctly fitting uniforms. Not all quite this bad. This is a scene at a mosque south of Tehran. It's a famous one for a certain sect of Shiites. This one's called Jam Quran. And the reason why this is important is that this is the place where many Shiites believe, and I say many Shiites because it's not completely common, it's kind of superstitious to some. But this is the place where many people believe they will be the closest, and have the closest contact with the Shiite Messiah, who is supposed to come back one day, just like Jesus is supposed to come back for Christians, for a second coming. So that man, the one who's supposed to be coming back, he's known as the 12th Imam. His name is Mahdi. He's also called Imam Zaman, the Imam of the era, the Imam of time, all of these things, many, many words for the Mahdi. So these men are there at a religious, it's kind of a storytelling. You've got people there, a religious storyteller. He sits in the middle of this group of 2,500 men, all men here in this case, and they're all pounding their chests at the same time. I can't tell you what an emotive moment that is to hear that happening in such a, in such a perfect, rhythmic, powerful way. So they hear these stories, and it gets very, very emotional when the storytellers, because he's telling these stories about what happened, for example, to Imam Hussein, the big tragedy, what happened to the family of the Prophet, what happened, all of these things. And they're told in a way that plays with the emotions. And they're told very, very poetically. And when it's finished, everyone is in tears, there's sweat pouring down everybody, and these guys, like these ones are like, they are waiting for the Mahdi to come right now. It's like being at a revival meeting 150 years ago, where people are waiting for that Messiah to return. This is a scene at one of the martyrs' graves, or one of the graves of someone who was killed during the Iran-Iraq War. I don't know that we'll get into it very much today, but an absolutely formative experience for the Islamic Republic was the 1980s Iran-Iraq War. So here we had Iran and Iraq together lost about over 200,000 people during an absolutely gruesome war. I mean, literally, it was like First World War type trench warfare, hand-to-hand combat, and of course the Iraqis used a lot of chemical weapons against the Iranians as well, which the Iranians will never forgive Iraq for, nor will they forgive the United States, the Western companies that provided those materials and intelligence, in fact, for a greater lethality that the Iraqis were able to exact on the Iranians. So this is the kind of scene that we see many, many times in Iran. There are martyr cemeteries across the country. One of the biggest ones is called the Hesht-e-Zara. It's south of Tehran. This particular one is out on the western border, closer to Iraq. And people visit. Sometimes families go back to these graves every single week, sometimes more than once a week. And you know, they leave flowers, they leave food, depending on what the circumstances are. You can always go and get sweets or dates or soup sometimes in the wintertime. And they really are here. Sometimes people are talking to their martyrs. As far as they're concerned, that's the way of being contacted. I put this picture in because I wanted to illustrate one of the reasons why the Islamic Republic still has supporters among many people in Iran. And one of the reasons is this one, and that is all of these are books which are full of orphans, pictures of orphans, and everybody, for, you know, anyone can basically take care of, sponsor one of these orphans for something like just a few dollars a week or a few dollars a month. And there, inside Iran, there's a foundation, the Imam Khomeini Foundation, which has the furthest reach of any organization in the entire country. And it's been this way since the first days of the revolution. In fact, this organization got its first, first taste of doing this kind of charitable work even before the revolution, when the Shah was still in power, and protesters and revolutionaries were striking. They were not going to work. And so this organization began to collect funds to give to the families of those who weren't working so that they could get by. So the moment that the Shah fell, people who were in this organization began to go to every single village in the country. I'm not kidding you. Every single village, recording what people's needs were and providing them on a very micro level. So when Khomeini spoke about justice, we will bring you justice, this kind of organization is exactly what he was talking about, and which has the respect of so many Iranians. This organization has a greater reach than the Iranian military, Iranian, intelligence services. I mean, literally, there's charitable organizations everywhere. And you hear people. I've written quite a bit about it because you really want to understand why is it that this regime still has popular support? Why is it? Just to give you one example, I spoke to a lady, young lady who was at university, was just finishing getting her law degree. She had been rescued 10 years earlier from her family, which had been broken apart by a bad marriage and by drugs. A lot of, there were addicts in her family. There's a lot of abuse, and so this organization plucked her. This is one of their jobs. Took her away from that, provided free housing, provided free education, got her through law school, and of course she's devoted to the Islamic Republic for doing this for her, because her family never would have been able to allow her to do that. So this is where Khomeini is actually buried. He's in that central shrine there, and this whole thing is a huge shrine that's south of Tehran, close to, just adjacent to that, the Hesht-e-Zara cemetery. And this is an event. Really, the calendar in Iran is absolutely full of events. It's just, holidays, days off, no work ever gets done there. This is the event on the 1st of February that's marking the anniversary of the day that Khomeini first returned to Paris, or to Tehran, from exile in Paris. And this day begins what they call the 10 Days of Dawn, the 10 days marking the gap between when Khomeini first arrived and when the Air Force gave him their support, which marks basically the day of the revolution, which is the 11th of February. So anyway, pick a day on the calendar, you will find a good reason to be off of work. But I put this picture here because it illustrates, I want to show how politics have changed in the way that it was run before Ahmadinejad in Iran and the way it has been run since Ahmadinejad. Because these guys, this one, of course, you recognize Hashemi Rafsanjani, former president of Iran. He's also, he's been an important power figure in the Islamic Republic for decades. From the very, very beginning. He is in a place in North Tehran that's called Jamaran. And it's famous because this is the place where Khomeini himself preached. And that white chair, which nobody sits in anymore, is actually the chair that Khomeini, well, at least that's the location that Khomeini used to preach. The day that he died in 1989, in fact, people went into this place and took the chair, splintered it, and then took pieces home, just like, you know, you might have taken home pieces of the cross if you were so lucky to have been there. But anyway, so people took it apart. And this isn't the actual real live chair, but this is the same spot, and this is where Khomeini preached. So to give you an idea, this is a picture that was taken on election day in 2005. And this is how the old guard did it, the pre-Ahmadinejad guard. For example, we journalists, we're all lined up behind a piece of string. Okay, so we're all sitting here, you know, prim and proper, we're taking our pictures. And Rafsanjani sweeps in like a sultan. He's got immaculate robes and everything else. He comes sweeping in. He nods appreciatively to the election officials who were there. And then he takes his ballot and says hello and this and that, casts his ballot, raises his arms, and then goes over to the podium where he says he's devoting the rest of his life to making sure that radicalism doesn't take over in the Islamic Republic. And then he leaves, again, sweeping out like an emperor. Well, so, okay, fair enough. That's how these guys have voted for a long time. So we raced from there all the way down to Narmak, which is a working class suburb in eastern Tehran, which is where Ahmadinejad comes from. And you remember that in 2005, this is the election, this was the day that Ahmadinejad became president. He had been, until that point, the mayor of Tehran, refused to live in the mayor's mansion, right? Listed on his list of assets, because of course you have to list your assets when you run for president, and we're not joking here. He listed a bank account that had no money in it. He listed a 25-year-old Paycon, which is a kind of, it's a car that's made in Iran, but, you know, with kind of Peugeot parts and things like that. But I mean, they're really, you know, it's not the kind of thing Iranians aspire to normally. So very, very old Paycon, and that was it for assets. So even today, now that Ahmadinejad is being tainted by a $2.6 billion corruption scandal, it's actually not him. Don't worry, it's not Ahmadinejad. It is other people who were around it. In any event, this is how the old guard did it. So we raced down, we journalists raced down to Narmak to see Ahmadinejad vote. So, and of course, this is a completely different scene because we're in this working class suburb. We're in this mosque, and we're in a mosque, but then there's kind of a little place. It's not particularly large from here to there to there. And we're standing up on this little stage waiting for the man to arrive, and the place is already packed. And the second Ahmadinejad arrives, it's like somebody took a hand grenade and just rolled it down the aisle. Boom! Pandemonium completely erupts. And Ahmadinejad, who is like 3.5 feet tall. I'm not kidding you. I mean, every time he speaks, you ever notice, if you're actually watching him, you'll see that some aide comes up and kicks a little footstool down in front of the podium because he is short. Anyway, so he, you can't even see him for all the security he's got. And he comes through this crowd, hugging, bear hugging, and kissing his way. Right? I mean, this is a real, the kind of the proletariat's way of being a retail politician. This is a populace in Iran. And Iran had never seen a politician like this ever. Because when the revolution came in 1979, this basically was the end of 2,500 years of monarchy. I'm quite sure the Shah and his father, the Shah before him, did not behave this way. Mossadegh, who of course was toppled in the CIA's first ever coup in 1953, known for his populism, well, he never could behave that way, like Ahmadinejad did. So anyway, just to give you an idea about how this transfer of power has worked. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Ahmadinejad. This is on that same day. This is in Narmak, that neighborhood, that working class neighborhood. And so here are some supporters. At that time, we said that the people who voted for him were the pious poor. Right? These were the religious people who didn't have very much money, who believed that Ahmadinejad was going to take Iran's oil money and, as he said, put the oil money on everybody's dinner table, or on the sofre, which is kind of the mat that they lay down on their carpet to eat.